So you want to play a comp where you have all frontline with infinite sustain. Well, you came to the right place because Exteria is here to tell you about Vertigo Bruiser comp. In this video, we're going to cover the strongest items, strongest units, and strongest augments. For our items, the main carry you want to play would be Aurelia, and the reason why is because her damage is actually pretty good, it's pretty insane, and she works well without having duelists on the board because her damage is good enough to where it breaks armor, so her autos actually do a lot of damage, and then on top of that, when she casts her ability, it almost executes a backline unit. And then Aurelia's best in slot item would be Red Buff. This item is actually the best item on her hands down, mainly due because the way how she works, since she's an AoE auto attacker, so therefore she burns the whole board with this Red Buff item, and it gives her attack speed so she can keep casting her ability even more. Since she's not mana based, she's more like an energy like on hit base. And then having a death play is very good on her to amplify her damage, since she needs that flat damage to amplify her auto attacks. And then for this con specifically, having a Bruiser emblem is actually very good on her because you can have 8 Bruisers on the board. And then having more HP on Aurelia is actually really useful because she can keep casting her ability even more because she lasts a lot longer. And then her best alternative items would be having a Runan's Hurricane because this item is actually one of her highest win rate items since it gives you damage and attack speed, and it gives you magic resist on top of that since this set is actually AP heavy base, so therefore having that magic resist helps her stay alive a lot longer. And then if you can't get a Death Blade, you can also get an IE to amplify her damage, but Death Blade would be more preferable, but most of the time you can't build that, so having IE is okay. And then same thing with Giant Slayer. If you cannot build a Death Blade, you can build Giant Slayer is fine, or if you don't have a Bruiser emblem, you can build one of these items instead. If you can't build a red buff, you can also build a Merlicon for anti-heal on the board as well, or a Sunfire Cape on a tank unit. Aurelia's best Ornn artifact would be Collector. This item is actually very powerful on her because she needs that execution, and since she's always continuously auto-attacking, having that little tick damage to do the execution clear out the board a lot quicker, and the Sniper Focus is also very good on her. Since she's also a 7 hex range unit, having the Sniper Focus actually abuses her range even more, so it'll make her to 8, and then the further the unit is from her that she's autoing, the more damage she does, so therefore she can actually clear out the board a lot quicker with this item. And then I saw that Vampiric Scepter is a very high win rate out on Aurelia, but I would actually prefer not to pick this up, but if you don't care about her ability to execute the backline, then this is actually pretty good if you want to shred the whole board instead. And then the best other DPS unit you could have on the board would be Silas. This unit is actually very powerful at the moment because for one, he's AP, and two, he's a bruiser. So therefore, having this unit on the board that's also a frontline unit that does damage, and having a unit that can also sustain long enough is actually pretty good to have. And then his best in slot item is Onyx Spark because this item actually gives him magic resist shred, which reduces magic resist, it gives us some AP, and it gives us some magic resist. His other best item is Adaptive Helm. This item gives him more sustain, and it gives him more time to keep casting more abilities, so he can just keep sustaining even more since his ability is every time he casts, he gains health back. And then having a Crown Guard gives him even more sustain, with on top of that, even more AP. This item gives him a shield, and after it breaks, it gives him even more AP after that shield breaks. His best alternative items would be Bloodthirster. If you cannot build Adaptive Helm, having a Bloodthirster is okay, because it makes him last a lot longer, so you can also keep casting as well, since it gives him lifesteal. And then if you cannot build a Crown Guard, having a Titans is actually very good on him, because it gives him more sustain, and it gives him some AP on top of that. And if you can't build Eater, having an Archangel Staff is fine, because it gives him more AP over time, but in the end, always have an Onyx Spark on him no matter what, because if you don't have this item, he's not going to do enough damage. And then for Silas's best or an artifact item, it would be Seeker's Arm Guard. This item gives him some AP, and after execution, it gives him more stacks of armor, magic resist, and more AP. Zonies is also another great one, because if he goes below 50% HP, he becomes invulnerable for a couple of seconds, so during that time, he can just keep casting his ability to get his HP back. And then because Silas is casting a lot, having a Lich Bane is actually very good on him, because it gives him empowered auto attacks every time he casts his ability. For support items, all these 4 is actually very good for sustain, because you're playing a tank board anyway, so you get more tank on top of that. And then for the ones I like to highlight, having a Radiant Virtue is actually very powerful, because it heals the whole board, so it gives him even more sustain, and it's like a redemption on steroids, so having this item is actually very powerful for Bruiser board. And then this item, Big Gem, is actually very powerful in general too, because you get a free ascension on the board, and your board usually lasts longer than 15 seconds, so after this item pop, your whole board just does extra damage. To fill up the rest of the comp, it would be having Bruiser units, so you have all frontline, which is all Bruiser, and then you have a main DPS Aurelia, with a main DPS Silas, and then your main tank is going to be Galio, with having a healing item such as Redemption to heal your whole board. If not, Radiant Virtue is actually a very powerful alternative as well, and then having a resistance item such as Gargoyle Stoneplate, or even having a Protector's Vow is actually pretty good on him. And then when you hit level 9, the +1 unit you want to throw in is Azir, because he's a Dryad unit with Rek'Sai, and then he's also a very powerful unit because he summons soldiers, which stalls the board even longer, so Aurelia can clean up the rest of the board. And then the main problem for this board would be having a Bruiser emblem. If you don't have a Bruiser emblem on Aurelia, you can drop one of the Bruisers here, such as Aatrox, Kobuko, or Tahm Kench. You could throw in either Rakan or Soraka, because it gives you Alturas with Riven. And then when you do play this board, you mainly want to play as a Kobuko carry if you get its hero augment, Lucky Paws, because this augment is actually very powerful on him, since because it'll make his ability one-shot people, and on top of that, he has infinite tank sustain, and his best items would be having a healing item such as Redemption, magic resist like Declaw, and then having a Bramble Vest to gain armor to gain that physical damage resistance. So if you have the Kobuko augment, this is how you'll play it. It's the same thing as the last one. This is just for if you get the lucky pause augment on Kobuko and you hit him level 3, he'll just one-shot everything. In order to get to that late game board, you have to learn how to play the early game, and I would say the best early game units to start with would be having a Story Weaver opener with Sivir as the Aurelia item holder, Garen as the Galio item holder, and then Jax as the Silas item holder. If not, you can do Rek'Sai as the Silas item holder because Rek'Sai is actually very powerful as well, but essentially it's just like having Story Weaver with all bruisers that you can fill up, and then you can throw in a Teemo if you want to get that trick shot in with Sivir so you can do extra DPS on the board. And then for whatever reason, if you can't do a Story Weaver opener, just having full Bruiser opener with having snipers is actually pretty good too, with Caitlyn as the Aurelia item holder, and then Rek'Sai as the Silas item holder, and then Kobuko as the Galio item holder. Unless you get lucky pause, you could play for reroll Kobuko 3 with the Bramble and Declaw instead of Gargoyle Stoneplate, and then you just one-shot everything with having 2 random backline units or 1 random backline unit to fill in the synergies, and then over time you hit level 9 to play Aurelia later. And then the best augments you can take is obviously Lucky Pause. If you can start with this augment, it would be the best because Kobuko as the carry is actually one of the best for all vertical bruisers. And if you cannot get Lucky Pause, you can play like just the basic stuff like Well Fed. This augment is very powerful for them because it gives them more healing, so the more bruisers you play, the more health they will get back. And then Bruiser Crest, because when you hit 8 bruisers, you get a lot of HP on the board because there's only 7 bruisers total. And then because you have a lot of HP, Heavy Hitters is a very good one because if you have more than 1500 HP, you do extra damage on top of that. And then U5 Resistance is a very good defense augment for bruisers since you're going to be playing bruisers all in a straight line anyways, so they get more armor and magic resist. And then Martyr is pretty decent because after a unit dies, the whole board gets 10% extra HP back. And that is it for my vertical bruiser comp guide. If you have any questions or you want me to cover a different comp, just let me know down in the comment section down below. Until then, I'll see you guys next time. Later.